Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the D14 2021 Legislative Town Hall. My name is Michael Tardif. I'm the Communications Chair for the Montgomery County Democratic Party. I am typically the man behind the curtain at these events, managing mics and videos, but our chair, Linda Foley, is out of town, and so I'm pinch hitting for her. I want to begin by welcoming elected officials who are in the meeting. Councilmember Evan Glass, Council Member and Council President Tom Hucker, and former Attorney General Doug Gansler, and Planning Commission Vice Chair Natalie Fani Gonzalez. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to your Senator, Craig Zucker.
Well, thank you very much. We want to first thank the Montgomery County Democratic Party. That includes Mimi Hassanin, who's also a member of the Montgomery County Democratic Central Committee. Michael Tardif, thank you for your help with coordinating this, as well as Linda Foley, and of course the other elected officials who are joining us tonight. We had done something similar to this last year that was hosted by the Montgomery County Democratic Party. We wanted to, again, just touch base with everybody, give them an update on what happened this past legislative session. Although some of us might be presenting certain slides, it doesn't mean that we were all, most likely we were all involved with the issues that one of our colleagues are mentioning. I just wanted to say, and we'll be getting to this later, how fortunate I am to serve with an amazing team, Delegates Kaiser, Delegate Ann Kaiser, Delegate Eric Lukey, and Delegate Pamela Queen. And it's obviously our honor representing you. And with that, we will get into the agenda. I would like to say that at the end, we will be taking questions. We do have some prearranged questions that you all submitted that we'll be answering, but if you have any questions, please put it in chat and we'll get to it. But with that, we'll move on with the agenda. I'll turn it over to Delegate Kaiser.
Thank you so much, Senator Zucker, and thank you for being the leader of our team. Tonight, I'll just be starting the agenda and a little bit of explanation of what's coming. I know that there's some new faces, and for some of you, this will be old information in terms of talking about both the team and our district. A big issue for us this past legislative session was responding to COVID-19 and how it impacted people's education, their business, their finances, whether they were on unemployment. We're going to hit legislative highlights: education, election law, police reform, health, economic equity, transportation, and the environment. And you might ask, what about some other very important issue that was number one to you? And to say that we consider over 1,500 bills during the legislature, and we are trying to hit the highlights that covered for most people, but we'll gladly take your questions at the end. We'll also get some budget highlights and Montgomery County highlights, and our senator who led us off will end with a special announcement near the end. Next slide. Yes, just want to make sure for those who don't know us, our team, Senator Zucker wears many hats in the state Senate, from Democratic caucus chair, the chair of our 8-member Senate delegation, the largest in the state, vice chair of the Rules Committee. He chairs a budget subcommittee, which means he's in a great position to provide a lot of money to District 14 and the county, and you can read the other personal information there. Delegate Queen serves on our House Economic Matters Committee and chairs one of the subcommittees. And we're so fortunate to have her there, given her PhD in finance. And as you know, she's a finance professor. So we're glad she's well situated on that Economic Matters Committee. And she also was chosen to lead a work group on economic stability, which was really about welfare. Delegate Lukey is our House Majority Leader and the Revenues Subcommittee Chair. And he's a former public school teacher who's working on getting his PhD. And he and I both teach adjunct. Well, I teach as an adjunct. He teaches maybe with a fancier title. We both teach at the University of Maryland. Next slide, please. And for everyone, for any kind of help you need, the number one thing that we do is constituent service. Any kind of help that you need, any kind of interaction with Maryland government. This past year, it's unfortunate that we had to do it, but we worked really well together to try to help as many people as possible who weren't getting their unemployment benefits. And that was a lot of what we did, and we worked together to make sure we're not duplicating each other's work. And even while we can't necessarily help with Montgomery County government or the federal government, we can make that phone call for you. We can intervene on your behalf. We can ask some questions and get your return call sooner. So we're able to help on any of those issues. So if there's something, any kind of interaction with government, give us a call. And our contact information is at the end of the presentation for those of you who are able to take a screenshot. Otherwise, when I'm done presenting in a moment, I will type in some of our information into the chat. So if you're able to use the chat, you can copy and paste out of there to for your personal needs to call us. The next slide is just, again, for anyone less familiar with the district. You see the listing of the communities there. We stretch from the Prince George's border, a long border with Howard County, Frederick County at the top, and surprisingly at the tippy top, we touch for like at least a few inches, we touch Carroll County. We have just 2 municipalities in our district. Our district, like most others, we have over 120,000 people. And we just listed the high schools here for those who have, not just who have kids, but to give another frame of reference to where our district is. So next, I will pass things off to Delegate Lidke.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight. It's great to have the chance to talk to you a little bit about the work we're doing and also to hear your questions and respond to your questions. So, you know, as Senator Zucker said at the beginning, as questions come up, feel free to throw them in the chat and we'll get to them as soon as we can. Obviously, going into this legislative session, the largest issue on many of our minds was how to respond to COVID-19. And not just in terms of public health and healthcare, but how to get our economy moving again. We know that the story of the pandemic is a story of exposing inequality between large businesses that were able to weather the pandemic recession fairly well and small businesses that have struggled. Inequality between wealthier families who've generally done okay and working families who've, you know, struggled tremendously. So on a bipartisan basis, we worked at the very beginning of session to pass a piece of legislation called the Relief Act. That bill provided over $1 billion of direct stimulus to working families and small businesses. And I want to highlight a number of the things that were in there. We included significant new funding to erase utility debt that's been growing throughout the pandemic. That utility debt, the way we forgave it in order to make sure that we weren't getting hung up on an application process, we made it so people didn't need to apply. That money went directly through the utilities to pay back arrearages for folks that had fallen behind to keep the lights on and the water flowing in everyone's house. We had almost $300 million of direct assistance for small businesses. We provided for Marylanders who've struggled to get unemployment because our unemployment insurance system clearly was not able to respond the way it should have during the pandemic. We provided direct support of $1,000 to people who were waiting for their case to be adjudicated by the State Department of Labor. And we used $300 million of federal money to help expand access to broadband internet. It's not on this slide, but I want to call out as well that part of that bill was the largest single increase in state history in a program called the Earned Income Tax Credit. The EITC is the single most effective anti-poverty program that we have in the state and federal government. And Maryland now has the highest earned income tax credit of any state in America. So I think that's something to be proud of. And we can go to the next slide. Education was another hot topic this session, as it is every year in Maryland. It consistently ranks as one of the most important issues for Maryland voters. Last year, we passed a piece of legislation that Chair Kaiser had worked on for a number of years as a member of a commission that's colloquially called the Kirwan Commission. But the bill that commission produced was called the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. And it is a 10-year plan, once in a generation opportunity to provide the support to our schools and our students that they deserve and try to reduce some of the inequities that we see in education. The governor unfortunately vetoed that bill at the beginning of this year's session. We overrode that veto. So the Blueprint for Maryland's Future is now law. We also passed a follow-up law that we nicknamed Blueprint 2.0 to fast track money for tutoring, summer school, technology, All of these designed in particular to address some of the learning deficits that have resulted from the pandemic and from students having to attend class remotely. Our budget this year provided more funding than at any point in the history of the state of Maryland for both K-12 schools and higher ed. We have been successful in securing, and this was an initiative driven by the Montgomery County delegation, in securing a record amount of money over the next couple of years for school construction through a bill called the Built to Learn Act. And we, under the leadership of Speaker Jones, who made it one of her highest priorities, we passed legislation that required a legal settlement and the provision over the next 10 years of almost $600 million in funding to Maryland's historically Black colleges and universities, which had been systematically underfunded for decades. And this was money intended to make up for that. And then in terms of elections, as you know, last year's election was one of the fairest elections in American history. There's been more scrutiny of the elections that happened last fall than any election, certainly within my lifetime. The reality, though, is that not everybody has access to the vote, even in a state like Maryland, which is relatively progressive in our election laws. We've seen across the country in states from Arizona to Florida, attempts to pass laws this year to reduce the right to vote, to restrict the right to vote, to make it harder to turn out to vote. Maryland made a very clear policy decision, those of us in the General Assembly, that we were going to go in the opposite direction. We wanted to set the standard for making sure that our democracy works and that everyone has the opportunity to cast a ballot. So we passed a series of bills that made it easier for certain groups that have the right to vote but have trouble exercising that right to vote to exercise their right to vote. That includes students at universities in the state, overseas military service members, people who are incarcerated but have retained the right to vote. So for example, people that are waiting for their case to be adjudicated by the court system. We added 2 more early voting sites in Montgomery County and expanded early voting opportunities across the state. We expanded the hours for early voting. We made drop boxes, mail-in ballot drop boxes permanent. We required the Board of Elections to send a ballot to all, to mail an opportunity to apply for an absentee ballot to all registered voters. We created an opportunity to sign up for what's called a permanent absentee ballot list. And we passed legislation aimed at the state's elections website and election materials focused on how to make them easier to understand. Our goal is to make sure that each one of you and every person in our community that is eligible to vote is able to securely and conveniently exercise that most fundamental right. And we made a lot of progress this year. And I will now pass it on to my colleague, Delegate Pam Queen.
Well, thank you, Delegate Lukey and House Majority Leader. Thank you for handing this off to me. So a lot of the bills you're here today, we tackled some major topics this session. And you may have heard earlier that the governor was signing many bills into law today. So there are major topics we will cover. One was police reform. And so the approach we took from the state is to make sure that we can restore community trust, have greater transparency, accountability, and really raise the expectation for a higher standard of operation. But what we wanted to make sure was that we had consistency across our 24 jurisdictions in Maryland. And so this was the result of several months of work, over 9 months of work, that the House had a work group that focused on these issues. The Senate held major hearings on these topics that we ended up putting into law. And so this was a major bipartisan effort to really balance some of the issues that we were hearing, but making sure that we had great police reform and accountability. So what did we do? We have enhanced the civilian involvement. So there's greater transparency into police misconduct cases. We have uniform penalties for police misconduct, uniform policy on body-worn cameras and use of force, standard policy on the application, timing, and execution of no-knock warrants, and also to enhance the process for our police hiring and assessing police and training them. So there's a standard approach to doing that. We looked at repealing and replacing the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights, and really to encourage more diversity in the ranks of law enforcement, to make it more of a professional career, providing tuition and training to help with that. Next slide. In the area of healthcare, one of the things we tried to address was many of the disparities that we saw. COVID-19 really uncovered that there are a lot of disparities in the healthcare and availability across the state, to make sure that we have greater access for all individuals, and really to re-examine how we're addressing the high cost of medical care. And so we established this Office of Minority Health and Health Disparities to really look at how we can improve the outcomes of health issues in various areas, and to make sure that some areas that we designate as needing additional health equity resources, that they get the attention and care that's needed to there's greater access to primary care and prevention services. We also are going to look at, we require now our healthcare professionals or providers to have bias training to address some of the health inequities that we've seen, attacking the medical debt, looking at having policies, standard policies and plans that are based on income, so that, again, having a health crisis doesn't leave you bankrupt. Also looking at extending maternal eligibility for Medicare, postpartum care, greater than the 60 days that we currently have. Also, we saw from COVID that telemed was very helpful in keeping people in contact with their doctors and physicians and getting the medical care that we need. And so we are looking at extending those options and coverage as well post the COVID crisis. And also to look at establishing mental health services with a phone call-in program. Next slide. In the area of economic equity, this was a major issue for Speaker Jones this year. We looked at the issues that we've been seeing from the viewpoint of how can we uplift communities, especially in increasing home ownership. We know there's some great intangible benefits in communities that have greater home ownership. We wanted to make sure that we provide greater access to capital for homeowners, as well as starting out entrepreneurs and struggling entrepreneurs, making sure that we expand the resources and support to all of our communities. So in the area of home ownership, we looked at creating this tax-free savings account for first-time homeowners or home buyers to help them on their path to home ownership, looking at alternate ways of defining credit worthiness so that housing loans could be obtained, and credit applications for, again, maybe starting a business. One of the things we know for in communities where we have greater home ownership, there's less crime, students do better in school, but also homes are also used for new entrepreneurs. Sometimes they start their business out of their home or use the equity for their homes to start businesses. So that's another great benefit. We looked at the diversity on our businesses, looking on their boards, executive leadership, and making sure that we encourage more diversity at the higher ranks of levels in our corporate businesses. And so those who are applying for state funding or want tax credits, they need to demonstrate that they have diversity plans in place. Offering more pre-seed capital money for minority entrepreneurs, so adding additional money to our Technology and Entrepreneurship Development Corp, TEDCO, to help with venture capital opportunities for minority entrepreneurs. And also to look at the digital divide. One of the things we realized with COVID, that their access to the internet is very important, not only for education we saw in school, but also for people to maintain their jobs, to be able to look for jobs and have that access being available, whether you're in a rural area, whether you're in a suburban area, or wherever you are in our inner city. So that was another important piece of what we did. Next slide, transportation. Again, there are some efforts. I know people are looking to see that would do more in this effort, and we will do more in the coming session. But the attention this time was looking at the differences in what's available for the Washington metropolitan area as compared to other parts of the state. And so we overrode the veto from last year, the Maryland Metro Transit Funding Act, which updates the budget calculation so that we can get more money into the Washington Metropolitan Transit Authority for projects in our area. Also, we passed the Transit Safety and Investment Act, which is also making sure we have adequate repairs needed from our Maryland Transit Authority, and also to help some of the small businesses that have been impacted due to the construction of the Purple Line. Next slide. In the environment, we had some good wins here. Actually, Sierra Club is celebrating right now some of the good wins from the 2021 legislative session. Again, the approach here was to consider impacts of climate change, help to make the state meet some of its clean energy goals. And so what we put in place was to have an advocacy position to talk about the issues of climate and its impact in the Office of People's Counsel, to make sure that we have greater funding for the Bay restoration efforts. Also to evolve into a zero emission public transportation for our buses. And here in the county, we will have a pilot program, the Community Choice Energy Pilot Program, that is a way to provide clean energy options for our residents in Montgomery County that are at affordable rates. And also the increasing the limits for electricity net metering so that we can encourage greater use of renewable energy. I will turn this over to Senator Zucker.
Thank you very much, Delegate Queen. So now we turn over to an area that I enjoy, the Maryland budget. Although we were really worried heading into this legislative session based on the negative impact that COVID had on our economy. We had seen job loss skyrocket. We lost more jobs in 3 weeks than we did over a 72-week period during the Great Recession. So when we entered this legislative session, we were very worried that we were going to have to cut and sometimes even cut some of our priorities. But based on smart budgeting by the General Assembly, working with the governor, and the support we got received from the federal government, we were able to end this session with about $2.1 billion in savings. That's between what we have in the bank account, it's called our general fund, and our rainy day fund, which is basically the state savings account. And what we did was very much what you heard Delegate Lukey allude to earlier with the Relief and Recovery Act is we put it to making sure that we get people back on their feet and investing in our priorities, because the budget of Maryland reflects our values. So we put more than $572 million into expanding COVID testing, contact tracing, making sure that people had Medicaid funding and health coverage. We invested more than $13 billion on that. We have both transportation unemployment insurance. We have transportation trust fund and an unemployment insurance fund. And we wanted to make sure that people can utilize that. So we invested close to $1.6 billion. Look, I mean, we can't state clear enough what this pandemic has had to learning loss. I think Delegate Lukey alluded to it earlier, said it earlier. So we wanted to make sure that kids were getting back to school, opening up school safely. And when they were in school, they were in an environment that was healthy with clean air. So we invested $600 million in that, invested in our higher education institutions, especially our community colleges, $371 million there. And and then we have another $300 million coming from the feds, which will come to about $600 million that is going directly to our community colleges. And then we have $85 million going to our parks. As you know, during COVID and now that we're out of it, our kids want to be at the parks. So we want to create all that opportunity by funding it. You can go to the next slide. So what does that mean for us? Well, there's what's called the bricks and mortar budget. It basically funds construction, and that's called the capital budget. And we funded $4.5 billion in that budget, which we brought over $125 million we being the District 14 team and our colleagues in the Montgomery County delegation, more than $125 million to help fund our local community treasures and our organization. So when it comes to school renovations, Montgomery College, health facilities, public safety, that's aside from the 16 million that we funded in the budget for additional public safety assistance, an additional 45 million for parks and rec infrastructure, transportation, and then over $5 million for local community projects. We can get to the next slide. So what does this mean for District 14? I think my colleagues have said it many places that this was probably one of our most successful sessions ever when it comes to delivering as a team for District 14, working with the county, and working with our colleagues. But this is what we delivered for Montgomery County. And I think the East County, I know that the East County got record funding, the most that they've ever gotten in our time in the legislature. So we invested over $5 million for the Burtonsville parking garage. That's going to be one of the anchors on the other side of the shopping center in Burtonsville Crossing. In addition to the $5 million, we also what's called pre-authorized. So $5 million is going to be released this July, and then we have another $3.5 million coming in the July of 2022. We funded retirement homes. We funded our local townships, an only satellite police station. We're renovating that, Damascus Park, and Sandy Spring Museum. So really, there's no part of our district that we didn't help obtain money for, and everything that people asked for, we got. And now I'll turn it over to Delegate Lukey.
Thank you, Senator. And so Senator Zucker mentioned briefly the $5 million we secured for the Burtonsville parking garage. This is all caught up in the conversation about the Burtonsville Crossing Shopping Center. And I know we got some advanced questions about that. And I know it's something that's always on the mind of folks in the sort of greater Burtonsville area. It is and remains unacceptable that shopping center has been moribund for a decade now. And so we're continuing to prioritize that. That $5 million for the parking garage, that parking garage is hopefully going to help anchor some redevelopment in that part of Burtonsville. We also got Burtonsville access to a fund called the National Capital Strategic Economic Development Fund. So that's a fund that traditionally only provides economic development funding to communities inside the Beltway. We wrote it so that, and actually I know we've got council members here too, who might be interested in this. We essentially rewrote the law for a couple of years to allow enterprise zones in Montgomery County, so not just Burtonsville, but Wheaton as well, to gain access to that economic development funding. So that hopefully will help as well in redeveloping Burtonsville Crossing. We are continuing to work closely with county and state partners in trying to fix that problem. In the sort of only Sandy Spring Ashton corridor, you should know that in part as a result of the work we've done, SHA, the State Highway Administration, is going to begin work on some road improvements on the section of 108 between Olney Mill Road and New Hampshire Avenue. Those will include some resurfacing, some fixes to the drainage and the sort of geometry of the intersection at Brook Road, which is an issue for the Sandy Spring Volunteer Fire Department. And also the beginning of the completion of the bicycle and pedestrian connections from Olney all the way through to Ashton, all the way through to New Hampshire Avenue. We've been prioritizing trying to get safe bicycle and pedestrian routes built out, in particular because people are walking and biking a lot more now as a result of the pandemic than they ever have. We can go to the next slide. So some sort of larger county-wide things. First of all, one of our constituents, Lou Willen, who's I think an Olney resident, noticed something. He is an expert on property tax issues, has made himself an expert on them. And he noticed that the State Department of Assessments and Taxation had been systematically overcharging Montgomery County residents on their property taxes for years. And when this problem was pointed out to the State Department of Assessments and Taxation, that department said, okay, we will fix the problem going forward, but we're not going to refund any of the money that we took from these homeowners illegally. And of course, our delegation and the entire Montgomery County delegation said that's not happening. And actually, under the leadership of Senator Zucker and one of our House colleagues, Delegate Al Carr, we passed a bill requiring that they pay that money back. So it doesn't apply to every homeowner in Montgomery County, but some owners in Montgomery County will be getting refunded money that they were unduly charged on their property taxes to the tune of somewhere between $7 and $10 million. There are also a series of local bills that passed. Local bills are bills in Annapolis that only apply to one county. So these are bills that only applied to Montgomery County. I had a bill that passed that will refund a year's worth of the alcohol fees that bars and restaurants pay as a way to help them out, given that they struggled so much during the pandemic. We passed legislation to increase transparency at two important government agencies, the County Housing Opportunities Commission and the Washington Suburban Sanitary Commission, our water utility, which you may or may not know, owns the land on most of District 14's northern border. So it's a significant feature of our district. We passed a bill that would allow Montgomery County, after an engineering study, at least outside of urban districts, so really anywhere in District 14, to lower speed limits on some roads as low as 15 miles an hour. So if you are in a community where you would like that to be considered, reach out to us and we're happy to walk you through the process of how to sort of request that from the county. And to allow the county to create a pilot program for what's called community choice energy, which would allow county government to help promote clean energy in new and innovative ways. And I will hand it back off now to Senator Zucker.
Well, thank you very much, Delegate Lukey. So we have a very important announcement to make. It has been, an honor of our collective lifetimes to serve in the General Assembly, working as a team collectively to deliver and work on your behalf. And we are announcing tonight that tomorrow morning, we are going to be going into Annapolis, because that's where we file for office. We're going to be going in collectively as a team to file as a District 14 team to file for re-election. In the past, we've prioritized support for schools, families, and small businesses. We've continued to play, and we've all played a vital role in strengthening education, including the passage of the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. And we're going to continue doing all we can to families and small businesses and all those impacted and who are recovering from the pandemic. And we're going to continue to work collaboratively to continue doing what we've done most recently with this past legislative session to promote racial and economic equity. And we just wanted to take this opportunity to thank Congressman Raskin and Sarbanes for backing us up, endorsing us, and saying, during these challenging times, we need leaders like the District 14 team. So we are ready to go. There's a lot more work to be done, and we look forward to working tirelessly on your behalf.
It's just my job here to just point out to everyone, and we can hold this here for a few moments for anyone who needs our contact information. As I said earlier, you can see our numbers here. They're mostly the same except for the last 4 digits if you're hurriedly writing them down. Our email addresses, you can find us on Facebook, you can find us on Twitter. There's a link here to the General Assembly website, which is a good place to start if you have questions on some legislation. And then I will pass it back to Dr. Delegate Pam Queen.
Well, thank you, Delegate Kaiser and our outstanding chair of the Ways and Means Committee. So we will start to take questions. I think we had some pre-sent in questions. Michael, do you want to start the questions, or how do
Yes, sure. I'm trying to walk and chew gum here at the same time.
No problem.
So here we go. I think we have all 4 of you up now on the screen. And I'm going to start with a question that was submitted by Alice Orduzar. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. She is on the call. For each of you, could you name one bill that you opposed and that passed, and why you opposed it? And one bill you supported that did not pass, and why you supported it. Senator Zucker, you want to start?
Sure. Well, one bill that I opposed that passed Well, typically, I mean, I think part of why we're such a great team is we're all in leadership. So if there's a bill that we're really against that's not good, then it's probably not going to pass. But typically speaking, I thought we had a very, very successful session. I tend to focus on the bills that were good that we passed, which was the Relief Act, Blueprint 2.0. So I think we had a great session. In terms of one bill that I supported that did not pass, one of the bills that I supported that didn't pass was the Climate Solutions Now Act. Because we had a 90-day session, we didn't have time to work it all through. But one of the things that it just shows how well we work collaboratively with the House is that we worked as a team to incorporate a lot of the Climate Solution Now provision into other bills. So even though we didn't pass it, it was included in other bills that we passed.
Alice, that's a great question, but I really have to think about that part because I am, part of the Speaker Jones leadership team, and I can't say there was anything this year that I really hated that we passed. There may have been bills that I wanted differently. So I'll answer the question maybe with two bills that I wished that we had passed. As chair of the Ways and Means Committee, there are 6 different subcommittees, and our education subcommittee had a lot of work this year. And we had 2 big bills that I wished had greater success in the Senate. And admittedly, I can't blame the Senate. It took us a while to finish it, and we probably had to work on it sooner or get the agreement sooner. But we were trying to do work on virtual education. Clearly, this pandemic has demonstrated some challenges that a lot of schools had, a lot of students had, and trying to plan for the future to ensure that we're better at virtual education. And if there is ever another disaster like the pandemic or something else that impacts our school system, we wanted to be more ready. And so I was disappointed we didn't pass that. Similarly, while Delegate Queen described the police reform, one thing we didn't do was deal with school resource officers. And we like the long distance cousin of the police reform bill. And we were trying to create better, we weren't trying to eliminate them. We were trying to create better standards and better training. And it was, both of those are a disappointment to me that we weren't able to finish them. Thank you for that question.
Delegate Ludke.
I was pausing to see if Delegate Queen wanted to go next, but she's throwing me under the bus by staying quiet. To Senator Zucker and Delegate Kaiser's point a second ago, we're all Democrats in this team. We have a Democratic supermajority in both houses of the legislature. It's rare for a bill to come to the floor that I don't support. And actually, this session in particular, I have to tell you, and majority leader, so part of my job is to brag on the work that we do in the legislature. But honestly, like that aside, we did a tremendous amount this year. This was the most productive legislative session I've seen in my career. And I think that's a universal feeling among members of the legislature. And it was a lot of really good stuff. I was going to say the Climate Solutions Now Act, but Senator Zucker took that. So I'll say cannabis legalization. I think it's time for us to join the growing number of states, including our neighbors in DC and Virginia, that are legalizing recreational cannabis. I think the science is clear that cannabis is not nearly as dangerous of a substance as are nicotine and alcohol, which have obviously been legal for a very long time. And I think we should at some point soon pass a legalization bill and make sure that legalization bill ensures that the industry is open for small minority and women-owned businesses, and that some of the funding, some of the revenue that we get from it helps to try to address some of the long-term issues, in particular in communities of color, that have been caused by the drug war.
Delegate Queen.
Sure. I think we've covered a lot of topics. The only thing that comes to mind regarding bills that I don't think we got a chance to address was some of the gun bills. There's a bill that one of our colleagues, Delegate Lopez, has on ghost guns. and we didn't get a chance to really deal with that. And now that's starting to have a lot more national attention. So that's probably an area where we didn't get a chance to spend a lot of work on, and I hope that we will focus on that next session.
Thank you. We have three questions from Isa Haddad, and I'll start with the first one for Senator Zucker. Universal free school lunch was funded for the 21-22 school year, is that correct? And will the General Assembly make this a permanent program if federal funds are cut?
Yeah, well, it's coming right now. Yes, it's correct. It's coming out of the USDA, and it goes through next school year. So not this June, but the following June. It seems like it's been, I mean, I'm sure that the team agrees that it's been a real important part of going back to school for the kids and making sure kids are eating, especially during these very difficult times where we're trying to see the end of this pandemic. I think that we would like to see the program continue. Obviously, we have another year that we can reevaluate it, but I think the state has made tremendous efforts, at least this past session, to making sure we're getting not only kids back to school, but we're giving them every opportunity to be funded in the process. So, yeah, I mean, I could definitely see us in the future doing something to offset costs, but we'll have to take that when it comes, considering it really needs to be handled federally, because it's a national issue, and I'll be interested to see what happens on the federal end, and we obviously want to help Marylanders wherever we can.
Thank you. The next two questions, also from Isa Haddad, are about priorities for the upcoming legislative session. Maternity, paternity leave, and universal child care, are these priorities for you? And I'll direct it first to Delegate Queen.
Well, thank you. So, yeah, I would say I would answer for the team that these are both very much important priorities for us. Maternity and paternal leave has been something we've been trying to get past in one of the efforts that I've been doing as part of the economic stability work group. We've been looking at issues that have been raised as barriers to success for families to raise themselves out of poverty and be sustained out of poverty. Childcare and housing are the two major issues that we've been dealing with. Also, the ability to be able to have leave with pay is another part of that. So we certainly find this is a very important piece, paternal and maternal leave, as well as childcare. The cost of childcare and access to childcare will be very important priorities. And I expect that we will do something around childcare out of the economic stability group next session.
Delegate Luckey, you had talked a little bit about marijuana legalization in your earlier remarks. Is this a priority for the next session?
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of legislators, it is. I mean, you can never predict, particularly, I mean, we're pretty far out from the next legislative session, so you can never predict, and there are a lot of details that need to be worked out. But I think it's going to happen sometime soon.
The next two questions are from Ali Jacobus in Olney. And the first question is, what plans are there to address the school-based employees who were left out of the career ladder in the blueprint for Maryland's future? In other words, school psychologists, social workers, speech pathologists, occupational therapists, physical therapists. Delegate Kaiser.
Thank you. Great question. And that was certainly a challenge for us while working on, and just for backup for everyone else, when we were looking at this Kerwin Commission and looking for opportunities to, bring us forward and look at all the best practices in other states and other countries. There was certainly talk that we were leaving out other professions. I think this kind of goes really, though not the exact same question, but kind of goes to the questions that Isa Haddad was just asking, and really back to what Alice was asking. Like, what are we unhappy that didn't happen? Every session there's only so much time and that we're able to do certain things, and so much work that can be done. And there's always that unfinished business, which means that we're coming back next year. I think that the school psychologists, counselors, therapists, and all the others have made a good argument about why they too need this thing called a career ladder that allows them to basically, with added experience and added success, move on to the next level and be better appreciated for their work. So I guess like everything else, I would say stay tuned, and it's something that we'll still be looking at.
Thank you. Delegate Ludke, where do things stand with passing a local bill to allow MoCo to implement either ranked choice voting or approval voting? That's also from Ali Jacobus.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I've actually sponsored ranked choice voting legislation in the past that ended up being amended to include allowing approval voting. I think Maryland is a little small c conservative in shifts in sort of our voting procedures. And there's good reason for that, which is concern about confusing voters. So I think there's a lot of work that still needs to be done by advocates to educate members of the General Assembly about the benefits of, for example, ranked choice voting. Personally, I think ranked choice voting is a way to make sure that voters really have a chance to have their true opinions registered in who they elect, and will help to reduce some of the partisanship and the fighting that we see in our politics. And I think you're seeing that in places where ranked choice voting has been implemented. But I think it's going to take some time and effort to continue to educate folks in Annapolis about it.
And I would like to add to that answer, and part of what Delegate Lukey said is, there's some sense that having different ways of voting from one county to the next is something that people are really wary to do within the legislature. So I think for those who are interested in ranked choice voting for Montgomery County, should expand their advocacy and find similarly focused advocates in other counties to push for it in their jurisdictions. And then it's something that we can look at statewide.
Thank you. From Howard Grief, COVID-19 HOA related legislation regarding insurance coverage for COVID claims. Senator Zucker.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, look, I think we checked the team checked into this with Housing and Community Development. We've checked other agencies. We haven't seen any owners associations make any claims yet, but we had not entertained legislation this session around it. And if we did, I'm not on the committee of jurisdiction that would have seen it. But if there's any homeowners associations on this call, I know Delegate Lukey, Delegate Queen, and Delegate Kaiser say this often, and I join the chorus that please, if you have any issues that are important to you that you think we can help with, whether it's state, county, or local, we want to help. So if there's anything, if Tower Greif or anyone else has an issue with their homeowners association, please reach out to really any member of the team, and we'll work collaboratively to try to address it, whether there's legislation being sponsored or not.
Warren Fleming of Damascus would like to know, is Hogan still trying to eliminate retirees from paying taxes? Delegate Ludke.
Sure, and actually I had just, Warren had emailed me after an earlier conversation. I just drafted an email back to him, I think earlier today. The short answer is that Governor Hogan is very good at press conferences, and he has made a practice ever since he became governor of introducing bills in the legislature and sending out press releases and getting press coverage about them, and then not really putting any effort into getting them passed. Doesn't come to testify in front of the committee. His staff don't. I'm the chair of the Revenue Subcommittee, which is the subcommittee that passes tax bills. Nobody on the governor's staff came to me about any of his tax cut bills this year. So it's less about, in my opinion, bills like that are less about actually getting targeted tax cuts passed and more about getting attention. That said, making sure that retirees can continue to live in Maryland has been and continues to be a major priority for us. I think many of us would love to get to the point where we could just exempt retirement income from taxation wholly, entirely. But that is very expensive for the state, and particularly, in a time like we're in with the pandemic, where that would mean cutting services. Now is not the right time to cut services. So we've taken a kind of more targeted approach where we've targeted specific types of retirement income that we've increased exemptions for over time, including military retirement income, pensions for firefighters and other first responders, certain types of like railroad retirement. Social Security obviously is exempt from taxation in Maryland. And we're going to continue doing that work. But, the governor's proposals, that no bill goes anywhere without somebody pushing for it. And the governor's not pushing for it and not trying to figure out a way to pay for it.
Delegate Kaiser, from David Fishback and Olney, what are the prospects in the next session for the Inclusive Schools Act?
To everyone, I assume David is referring to legislation that he and I discussed recently to ensure that there's no discrimination that schools that receive any type of public dollars aren't discriminating against students, aren't discriminating against students' parents, aren't discriminating against teachers. That's legislation that we've passed in the House for a few years. And while I think Senator Zucker is with us, things in the Senate have to go through the Senate committees first. And we're having a little trouble with our Judicial Proceedings Committee and convincing them. And to everyone else, our public schools get over $7 billion of funding. And the private schools that get some federal dollars for poor kids or who get it for textbooks, they don't get that much. But there's certainly a sense that that if we're going to invest in these private schools, they shouldn't be violating certain ethics of civil rights that a lot of us share. And that's just something that we've had trouble with. So for anyone who has ability to lobby the senators on our Judicial Proceedings Committee, we'd appreciate your help.
Some of us did, by the way, without success. Delegate Lucky, you talked a little bit earlier about the funding for Burtonsville, and Sarah Watson of Silver Spring is asking, recognizing that it's a local issue, what is happening with Burtonsville Crossing Center, if you have any more gossip on that issue.
I think Sarah just put in a longer version of the same question in the chat, which is very much to the point and a totally fair question. And, I've been working on this issue since before I was elected. That's how long it's been going on. And I have said and continue to say that if this were a shopping center in Bethesda, the county never would have allowed this to happen, and never would have allowed it to go on for as long as it has. So, the challenge we have as a state delegation is we're not the county government. We don't control zoning, and we're not the property owner. And there are a series of reasons why Burtonsville Crossing is the way it is. And it goes back, frankly, to actions that happened before any of us were in office, when Route 29 was rerouted around Burtonsville, which took away a lot of customers from the shopping center. And then Giant moved across the street to Burtonsville Town Square, but held on to their lease in Burtonsville Crossing and paid the money for the rent just so they could prevent another grocery store from going into that shopping center. We ended up applying enough pressure on Giant, threatening to seize their lease by eminent domain, that they entered into a negotiation with the property owner, which is a company called Eden's, and eventually negotiated an end to that lease. But part of the negotiation does prevent the shopping center from having a large grocery store on the property. Eden's then had been working for a few years ago now to try to find anchor tenants there. They talked to gyms, they talked to big box stores, they talked to anybody they could talk to, couldn't find anybody who wanted to go into it, in part because there are challenges in the retail market right now. And eventually, frankly, the company stopped working very hard at it. And so, we've done what we can. We passed legislation specifically creating an enterprise zone designation for Burtonsville. We created a unique enterprise zone that only applies to Burtonsville. It's one of a kind in the entire state. We have passed legislation to get more funding for the area. We've done what we can from the state level. finally, this year we got fed up, and we introduced legislation to threaten to seize the entire, or to force the county to seize the entire property by eminent domain, which is not legal. We can't really do that. But it was enough of a big bat that it got the attention of both county government and the property owners. So Edens is meeting, I think, like next week with Better Burtonsville, which is one of the major organizations advocating for improvements here. The county executive has been engaged. Councilman Hucker, I should say, has been engaged throughout this, but I think the council is paying a lot more attention. So, what's the holdup? A lot of like inattention by people in power and by the company that owns the property. And we hope that inattention is done. And we've been putting our money where our mouth is, getting that funding for that parking garage, which will help anchor some redevelopment in the BRT line. But, I'm hopeful for the first time in a while that we'll see some change quickly.
Senator Zucker, Bernadine Carnes of Silver Spring has a multi-part question here, which is all related. What can Annapolis do to help stop road rallies? What can Annapolis do to get illegal mufflers removed from motorcycles or cars? Unregistered vehicles and disabled vehicles off local roads and out of our communities. These are serious problems that affect the peace and safety of anyone in Montgomery County and beyond. Police and county resources are doing their best to keep up, but they're short-staffed. Will Annapolis give more money to police and local jurisdictions to help end these problems? And will Annapolis update, change, and enforce laws to help eliminate these problems?
So on the road rallies piece, I know that in particular, we've been having issues in Burtonsville, where they've been meeting out of the Burtonsville Burtonsville Crossing Shopping Center. And the District 14 delegation has been in communication as of today, most recently as of today with the county executive, because we had seen footage of a recent road rally that happened over the weekend that to Delegate Lukey's point that the team is sort of fed up. This was another breaking point for us. So the county shut it down, but we have ongoing problems where they can shut it down one night, but people come back. So Delegate Lukey, Kaiser, Queen, and myself are working with Edens to see if they can block cars from coming in in the evening, so that way they're not able to enter the shopping center. So we're hoping the team is hoping to hear back soon. We look forward to working with the county on it. I think in terms of legal mufflers, I thought Delegate Lukey, were you working on that? Were you involved with that at all? I thought I remembered.
It's so these are enforcement issues, right? And it's hard for as in particular during the pandemic, road rallies and these extra loud mufflers that people are using, things like that, have become a hobby for people, a way to get out of the house. And so the county police, the state police, the Maryland Transportation Administration that runs the law enforcement on the ICC, they're all trying to stay on top of these things. But it's a little bit of a game of whack-a-mole with these issues. And we've had similar issues, in the district in the past, complaints about motorcycles on the ICC, particularly in the evenings. And it's, when you have these concerns in your community, it's important that you reach out to us, because we can immediately figure out who the appropriate law enforcement agency is to communicate with. And they can get on top of sort of stepping up enforcement a little bit. But, again, it's like whack-a-mole. I think, we have to, the community needs to provide that information so that law enforcement can do their job, but it's got to be an ongoing thing.
And then in terms of the police funding question, I just wanted to make sure we didn't ignore that, the public safety funding question. So the team was very helpful with working with the county to make sure that we still had an East County police presence. We provided record funding for District 14 this past session, which also includes public safety operating money for men and women in public safety, including men and women in the police department. Also, we wanted to make sure that we had quick response rates from law enforcement. So we invested more than $175,000 into the only police satellite station. So that way we have police in our communities that have a quicker response time if there's an emergency. So we're doing what we can to making sure that at least Maryland tax dollars are coming back to Montgomery County, and in particular District 14.
Delegate Queen, Kathy Reynolds of Silver Spring is calling attention to what I would call four quality of life issues: helping residents take advantage of job openings here and in neighboring areas, maintaining and enforcing zoning standards for communities, support for the homeless, and attracting higher end restaurants so that we don't always have to go to other areas to enjoy finer dining.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you for joining us this evening. Regarding the job openings, it was a year or so ago, we had the state worked with the county to host a job fair in East County, and it was well attended, had a lot of folks who came out to talk about businesses that were in our area throughout the county and neighboring jurisdictions. And so I think that was a very good thing to do, and we can continue to do that once we open up fully. But one of the problems I think is, what you might be alluding to, is how do we get information out? Because all the homes, all the people we're trying to attract may not have internet access, so they may not know about postings and may not know about where these openings are. And then also transportation could be another issue as well. But I think we are on the track as to starting a process, especially with these having these job fairs, to at least make sure we know where these openings are, and working with certainly with the East County board to really get that information out to our residents. So I think, and any ideas you have on that, please let us know. But I do think we've started that effort, and we can continue what has been what the seeds have been planted already. Maintaining and enforcing zoning standards for communities, that'll probably be more of a county issue. So we can work with the county exec and the county representatives to talk more about those issues, and certainly reach out to us so that we can figure out what exactly we need to look at or to address. But again, we can work with the county to address the specific zoning or standards for the communities that you're concerned about. Support for the homeless, as I alluded to before, that's one of the major issues that we're looking at from our economic stability work group. We have been certainly with COVID trying to address issues of not getting people evicted so they wouldn't be out of their homes. But we do have legislation that we have looked at and will continue to look at to provide certainly access to funding, using federal funds to support people who are homeless, making sure that we can get transition from homeless shelters into homes. Again, that's an area that we still need more work on. And again, any models that you're seeing in other states that we're doing, we will certainly welcome doing that at the state level. That is a very important issue for us that we are continuing to work on. The restaurants, as I listened to that, I was thinking about that as well. It's like when I do go to fine dining, I'm not in District 14 anymore. So that's a good point. We're certainly looking at how to redevelop Burtonsville. That may be something we can do to attract some restaurants there. But again, this will be something we can work well with the county to try to do that. But that's a good point. But please reach out to me so we can follow up and make sure we're getting some of these issues addressed. Thanks.
I wouldn't.
Something
Go
that
ahead.
Pam, sorry, something that Pam said, and also related to a question that Jim Gifford and Sarah Watson put out about, Burtonsville, that it's been a repeated issue, and why is it something still being worked on? The challenges that we have, that, government doesn't have the full power. We can't just tell a private business that they can no longer run their business, and to actually just acquire property, to take something through eminent domain is a pretty drastic step. So, the point of what Senator Zucker mentioned earlier, I think, about enterprise zone and trying different things through the years, we kept trying different strategies to make it work. we think we finally came up with a good strategy this year that at least scared Giant enough to want to come to the table. And so now it feels more positive. And then the state money that we've garnered of $5 million to help with, parking structure there, which can anchor something larger. It's that, we keep moving a little closer, but the challenge still is that government can't do everything that some people might want it to do in terms of what private businesses are doing. So we keep trying different strategies, and we finally found the solution this time.
And I would just add that we don't, in District 14, we don't pick favorite restaurants, but if I were going to suggest some nice fine dining areas in the only area, Matic and Peas is really good, Grill Marks, but again, we love them all. There's also some nice places in Damascus, but I'd also say that there's some absolutely great fine farm breweries around too. I think we have the per capita farm breweries in District 14, but I think to Delegate Queen's point, there is untapped potential in Burtonsville that we need to make sure we capitalize on.
And I just want to call attention in the chat, Eric Feldman of Council President Tom Hucker's office noted that Tom is working on these issues, and Eric put his own email address in the chat if you want to communicate with him directly on that. That's all the questions we had received in advance. We have a few in the chat, and there's one that Delegate Ludke and Senator Zucker that you've addressed in the chat, but since we have time, perhaps we could answer it live. And his question is budget related. Do you consider the state employee retirement trust fund to currently be actuarially sound?
And is Charles on? We'd love to hear from him.
I will check, see if he's here.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yes, he is.
And Charles, why don't you ask us your questions so we can address it directly?
Sorry, it took me a while to figure out how to turn off my muting. No, I'm a retired state employee, and I remember back in the 2008 financial difficulties, there was a corridor plan. Host is actually to start your video, okay? I was off looking something up for Eric about a Riderwood resident that was recently killed in an automobile accident out on Cherry Hill Road. So I was just asking what the state of the Retired Employees Trust Fund was at this point.
So I know Eric alluded to it. So we're at when we started, when Delegate Lukey and I started in the House in 2011, it was at about 60% funded. Obviously, the credit rating agencies want us to be at least 80%, and we made some changes a couple of years later. Took us into another calculating method. So we're right around 73%, but we're going to be fully funded probably within the next 10 years, but we'll be at that 80% much sooner than that. Every year, the Maryland General Assembly, through our smart budgeting, working as a team, invests more than $2 billion in making sure that we're investing in our pension fund. And then the Maryland General Assembly, those people that are on this call went above and beyond whatever the governor's going to do. And we have this thing called the sweeper. So anytime that we have extra funding, we sweep it into the pension fund to make sure that we're putting even more money into it. And that's around 75 million. So this team is continuing to make sure that our retirees are getting the money that they invested, and just as importantly, stay in Maryland while they spend it.
I don't see any other questions in the chat unless someone on the call wants to ask another question. I do want to thank everyone.
Sorry, Michael, we just had
Sure.
a question that popped up about whether we're going to be back this summer at the Only Farmers Market.
There you go.
We will be. Craig, we show about once a month with a constituent services table at the Only Farmers and Artists Market. And Craig,
June 16th. It's we're going to most likely have a constituent service table there, and MedStar Montgomery's president is going to be honored for all their work, and we're also going to be honoring a barbecue that's providing meals for those folks.
so if you go to I go to the farmers market every Sunday morning. So if you go, make sure to stop by that day, and you can chat with us and eat churros with us.
And just I think it's, I apologize, June 13th, the Sunday, June 13th.
Great, thank you. Well, I just wanted to thank everyone who submitted questions. Montgomery County Democrats always ask very intelligent, erudite, specific questions, and I think as many of these town halls as I attend, I learn just as much from the questions as I do from the answers. So given that we don't appear to have any other questions, maybe we can go to closing remarks, starting with Senator Zucker.
Well, thank you. I just appreciate everyone being on the call, appreciate the opportunity to serve you in the state Senate. Just thank you for sending these great legislators to be my teammates in Annapolis as well. There's really not a day that I don't wake up thinking, what else can we and the team do to make people's lives easier, especially during these challenging times. And we're going to continue having opportunities like this, hopefully physically rather than virtually, hopefully sooner rather than later. But thank you all for joining tonight. And I'll turn
Delegate, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Delegate Kaiser.
Well, thank you, Senator Zucker. And to everyone, I always say we are citizen legislators. Partly it means that we're in session for 3 months and holding real jobs the other 9 months of the year. But the other half of that equation is you and all of your friends and neighbors that not just the questions you bring up tonight, but if you have specific legislative ideas, please call, email, write any of us. And Lewis Willen's name was mentioned before for the bill that Senator Zucker worked on, and Lewis helped me with something over 15 years ago that returns $10 million to the counties every year based on his input. So I didn't know him. We just met at a local Starbucks and we worked on the legislation. It took us 2 years. So please stay in touch with that. And for me, it's a big week for me, both highs and lows. Tomorrow, Thursday, my daughter turns 2 years old. So we're very excited. And then unfortunately, but fortunately, I'm keeping my fingers crossed, but next Wednesday I'm having back surgery. So a lumbar fusion. So I'll be out of pocket for a good many weeks. And thankfully Zoom means I can still be connected, but just when people are starting to get out again and see people again, I'm not going to be able to get out for a little while. So I just want people to know and why I might be a little out of it for a while. So that's next Wednesday. On to you, Delegate Lukey.
Why don't we let Delegate Lukey close? He's the outstanding.
Oh, he's our closer. Yes.
Right. So
Delegate Queen, thank you for that correction, and to everyone. I put that high up in the chat. Delegate Lukey being chosen by Maryland Matters blog for being one of the winners of Senate, mostly for being the closer for the Democrats by ending all the big floor arguments for us as majority leader. So yes, he is the closer. So on to you, Delegate Queen.
So again, as was stated before, it's a good chance that Zoom has been a good opportunity for us to see many of you that we haven't yet had a chance to see in person. So we're happy to have you here with all your questions. Please feel free to reach out to us on any issues. If we didn't answer things to your satisfaction, let us know. We all are always open to see how we can improve our constituent services. And let us know if you ever see any places or things that are operating differently or better. Let us know, because we're always ready to implement very progressive and helpful laws here in Maryland. So that's all I have to say. It's been good seeing everyone. Always enjoy all the questions. And I'm going to turn it to my colleague.
Thank you, Delegate Queen. And I just want to close by saying thank you to all of you. I think all four of us feel the same, that it's the honor of our lives to serve in the legislature and to represent you in Annapolis. And to have the opportunity to do the kind of work we do is extraordinary. And we can't do it without you. We can't do it without your support. We can't do it without your votes. We also can't do it without you calling us and saying, what issues you want us to address. Saying, hey, I need help accessing my unemployment insurance that I'm entitled to, right? That allows us to do our jobs effectively when you communicate with us about what you want and what you need. So please be in touch and let us know what you want us to work on for next year. Let us know if there's any way we can help you or your family or your community. And we look forward to seeing you in person, hopefully relatively soon.
Thank you so much, D14 delegation members. I know that you are citizen legislators, but it seems to me that you're paid a part-time salary for a full-time job. You may be in session only 90 days of the year, but it seems like you're working for the people all year long. And for that, we are very grateful. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone who attended and ask everybody to turn on their mics to say goodnight.
Good night.
Good
Good night, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Good work.
Night.
Night.